Good evening and welcome to the Daily Roundup, where we give you a roundup of news that made headlines throughout the day, conversations around topical issues, and we zone into health and entertainment. I'm your host, Soini Nagongo. It's so good of you to join us this evening. First up, though, a look at your local news. Stay with us. The Monetary Policy Committee, MPC, of the Bank of Namibia has decided to increase the repo rate by 25 basis points to 7.25% with immediate effect. Now, this decision was taken following a comprehensive review of the global, regional and domestic economic developments.
To continue anchoring inflation expectations and safeguarding the peg arrangement, while simultaneously avoiding harsh impulses to the domestic economy, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Bank of Namibia decided to increase the repo rate by 25 basis points to 7.25% with immediate effect. This decision was taken following a comprehensive review of global, regional and domestic economic developments. Let us consider the domestic economic developments that informed this decision. Domestic economic activity improved in 2022 and the first 3 months of 2023. Inflation remained elevated while the growth in private sector credit extension, PSCE, remained weak. The stock of international reserves remains sufficient to support the currency peg and meet the country's international financial obligations. Annual growth in Namibia's real gross domestic product rose to 4.6% in 2022 from 3.5% in 2021. The expansion in domestic economic activity was on account of stronger growth rates in the primary and tertiary industries, as well as a rebound in the secondary industry. Since the last MPC meeting, domestic economic activity has continued to improve, primarily observed in the sectors such as mining, manufacturing, transport, communication, tourism, as well as wholesale and retail trade.
Now, Namibians will once again have to fork out more for their homes and vehicle installments. To help us make sense of what this development means for the average Namibian, we have invited renowned economist Salomo for his proverbial 2 cents. Mr. Hay, a very good evening, and welcome to the Daily Roundup show.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Well, Mr. Hay, today's upward adjustment to the repo rate did not come as a surprise. What would you say is at the root of these increases, and how many more hikes are on the cards for Namibia as per your projections?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the increase in itself did not come as a surprise. It was anchored well within market expectations. However, what came as a surprise is the 25 basis point. But one need to understand how we arrive at the 25 basis points. So what has happened is that for the past 12 to 18 months, we've been in interest rate hike cycle. What that means is that we've been consistently increasing our interest rates to try and sort of stem the tide against the high rising prices, which is essentially inflation. So by extension, when South Africa's inflation breaches their target range, which is between 3 and 6, which currently is the case, they have the monetary policy as a tool to rein in inflation. So once you start increasing interest rate, that's what they refer to as the transmission mechanism. And the transmission mechanism takes between again, according to the Bank of Namibia, between 12 to 18 months before it starts filtering through the economy. Now, what that means is that it takes almost 12 to 18 months when you start seeing an increase having an impact on the economy. So I think what the Bank of Namibia then did, because the expectation was, yes, there's going to be an increase, but I think we were really hovering around 50 to 75 basis points to keep within the usual variation between South Africa and Namibia. But what we did now is we sort of held back with a 25 basis point, obviously looking at the domestic economic drivers, the domestic economic environment, and the domestic inflation. And also taking into cognizance that the interest rate hike cycle has been with us now for well over 18 months, and the bank is perhaps looking at what has been the impact of these past increases in relation to inflation. But what we also know is that going forward, we're still going to see these increases because it appears inflation is no longer what we refer to as transitory, but it has become almost persistent. So it's not coming down as quick as we thought it would. So, and the Bank of Namibia had then to work this balancing act on the one side, trying to make sure it can gauge how far the current interest rate hike cycles, the impact it had on inflation and the greater economy, but on the other side also not to further overheat the economy by further increasing interest rates and further suppressing demand, which will mean that cost of living further alleviated from the borrowing cost, mortgages, and all other facilities that we have with the banks. So that's really been the thinking behind how the decision came about. In terms of how it will impact the consumers, households, and businesses, it means that there's going to be a further increase in your cost of borrowing. Your current facilities, whether it's an installment at higher purchase, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's an overdraft, or it's a credit card, whatever you were paying for it last month will now increase with 25 basis points. So you'll pay a bit more on all of those facilities. So we are really in a time where we have never been before. The economy is in a very unprecedented time. You can't even have an outlook longer than a week. If you look at what we have predicted in terms of the global economic outlook last year November to this year January to where we are now, the outlook has changed in this year already twice. What it means is that there's now the real fears of recession are back on the back of the Silicon Valley banks that collapsed, and subsequently how that is impacting the global economy and more the advanced economies, and there are chances of them going into a recession, and how that impact it will have on the inflationary environment that we find ourselves in, and how that then will have an impact on the sub-Saharan economy, South African economy, and then obviously the Namibian economy. So we are in such a fluid economic environment where we constantly need to keep tabs on what's happening almost on a blow-by-blow basis, as opposed to really looking too far ahead and having too many predictions in terms of what's going to happen. But in terms of today's monetary policy decision, it's another increase in the standard of living. We'll feel it in the pocket, but I think there was consideration for not being too aggressive in terms of the interest rate, because it also still being driven in greater measure from the supply side.
Now, Mr. Hay, does that mean that the panic amongst those citizens who are not within the categories, that are, paying off mortgages and so on, is the result of insufficient understanding of interest rates, or do they also need to tighten their belts?
Well, I think the panic is justified because we're paying more for everything. We're paying more for food, we're paying more for essential commodities. Now we're paying more for cost on other facilities that we have for financial institutions. So there's a general alleviation in cost of living. So what that means is that it is going to set back consumers, households, and then businesses. It will also impact on the ability to create new jobs, because once your borrowing costs increase, it means that your ability to be able to access financing is also compromised. So the panic is justified. They could also, to a certain extent, mean that once your borrowing cost of the business increases, you'd have to look at further downsizing. And downsizing could mean that perhaps you cut jobs here or whatever it is. So the panic is justified, but I think we really need to look at our budgets as households in terms of what are the priority items that you need to have on that budget, what are the essentials, and subsequently start cutting down on the luxuries that we can do without, because we are really in a time where we have never been before.
Mr. Hay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
That is Salomo Hay, the renowned economist, for his, of course, opinion of the announcement that was made today by the Bank of Namibia to increase the repo rate by 25 basis points. Has erupted in Khartoum and other cities in Sudan as powerful rival military factions battle for control, increasing the risk of a nationwide civil war. Khartoum's hospitals have been thrown into chaos by the explosion of violence. We are running out of everything, Dr. Amin Saad told the Associated Press. We are working with the least possible capabilities. We are all exhausted, but there is a shortage of physicians. There are some 20 hospitals in the capital and the neighboring city of Omdurman. Those that still managed to operate were understaffed and overwhelmed, running low on supplies and struggling with power or water cuts, doctors said. Al Jazeera has this report.
At the moment, it is almost impossible to provide any humanitarian services in and around Khartoum. There are calls from various organizations and people trapped asking for evacuation. For the past 4 days, people have been out of water, food. Electricity has been rationed, in some places totally disconnected. So we're talking about a situation where there has been calls to the Sudanese Red Crescent and also to the International Red Cross movement presence in Sudan almost on a daily basis from people wanting basic humanitarian services. This will not be possible until assurance for safety of the volunteers. We have thousands of volunteers who are ready, able, and trained to perform humanitarian services. Unfortunately, due to the current situation, they are not able to move. We have ambulances, we have people who are able to provide the first aid, the psychosocial support, but that will only be possible once that humanitarian corridor is assured by all parties.
Yes, that's very much the case. From the very first minutes of when the ceasefire was supposed to come into effect, we were able to hear heavy artillery and heavy shelling around the vicinity of the presidential palace, around the vicinity of the general command of the army. Those are the scenes of intense fighting over the past few days. In fact, since the start of the fighting between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese army. And even now, on the 5th day of the fighting, we can still hear the sounds of heavy artillery, the sounds of shelling, and it's not clear who is shelling at who exactly, because it's not clear for many people here to get a sense of who has the upper hand. But the Sudanese army did release a statement in the early hours of this morning saying that there is fighting ongoing around the vicinity of the general command of the army. They say that the Rapid Support Forces once again tried to attack the general command and that they are repulsing those attacks and were able to strike many of the vehicles of the Rapid Support Forces. The airport, another scene of heavy fighting and bombardments. There has been another airstrike. There's been another strike. It's not clear if it's an airstrike or just heavy shelling at the airport. A fuel storage depot has been hit with heavy smoke coming out from those vicinities, the vicinities of the General Command of the Army and the airport. So it's clear that despite that, this is supposed to be a period where there's a ceasefire and the two sides giving the chance for civilians to evacuate or seek basic necessities. That is not happening, and fighting is still ongoing.
The Russian and Ukrainian presidents have visited some of their forces, with both sides ready for a potential spring offensive. The conflict in Ukraine has become largely deadlocked, with heavy fighting in the east. Al Jazeera once more.
Дуже приємно всіх вас бачити.
It is a pleasure for me to see you, shake your strong hands, and know that you hold the future of Ukraine in your hand.
It is important for me to listen to you, to hear your views, to compare notes. I would like to begin your report about the situation in Kherson area, then Zaporizhia area.
Now, the Free Legal Advice Day forms part of the Law Society's objectives to make legal services more accessible to those members of the public who cannot afford legal services. Well, we'll take a quick break and look at some local news. Stand by. Now, the Free Legal Advice Day forms part of the Law Society's objectives to make legal services more accessible to those members of the public who cannot afford legal services. The Office of the Ombudsman has been instrumental in the success of the Free Legal Advice Day, or FLAD, since the project was launched in August 2024 by supporting this project and assisting the Law Society of Namibia with the venues and advertising in the region. Now, this year the day is set to be commemorated tomorrow, that's the 20th of April, at the Walvis Bay Magistrates Court. To give us more details on this is the Public Relations Officer in the Office of the Ombudsman, that's Aurelia David. A very good evening to you, Aurelia, and thank you so much for being here this evening.
Good evening, and thank you so much for having me.
Now, how would you describe the access to quality legal advice for everyday Namibians? Let's start right there.
Yes. Before I answer that, just a quick correction. The initiative was launched in 2014. How would I describe sorry, repeat the question?
How would you describe the access to quality legal advice for everyday Namibians?
Well, I would say, the ordinary Namibian cannot afford legal services. Legal services are generally very expensive. Even just a consultation to open a file without the lawyer actually even doing anything in terms of representing you in court or, representing you in a dispute or whatever the case may be. The access is there, but then the actual affordability is what is the problem.
Mm-hmm. So why did the Law Society and the Office of the Ombudsman see a need to come up with this initiative?
Yes, going back again to the first answer, really because of the affordability of it. A lot of people can't afford legal services. And, the Law Society then thought that why not take free legal advice to the people, go to the regions, to the communities, and just provide people with advice free of charge. And where the Office of the Ombudsman then comes in is that being the National Human Rights Institution, a lot of legal issues are sort of, related to human rights violations or human rights issues. That's then where we come in, where we join the lawyers from the Law Society and just register complaints as well as create awareness around the work of the office and things like that.
So this project has been running for quite a few years now, as you said, in 2014. How has the response been?
The response has been quite positive. We get a lot of outpouring from members of the public that come to these events and really just speak to people to get some free advice. And also just for the public to be aware that it's not just officials from the Ombudsman and the Law Society. We have people from the Master of the High Court, Ministry of Labor, as well as Ministry of Gender Equality, Poverty Eradication and Social Welfare as well. So the response is positive. That is why this time we are making it late in the afternoon until early evening, because what we've learned in the past is that people were sort of disappointed that we were ending at 1700 hours and they were at work and they weren't able to attend the events. So based on that feedback that we got from the people, we now decided this time to make it from 1300 hours so people can at least use their lunch time, those that work, to come, and then until 2000 hours. So those that knock off at, from 1600 hours, whatever the case may be, can come join us until 8 o'clock in the evening.
Right. So could you perhaps maybe outline a few of the most crucial topics that you'll be giving advice on?
So, as I mentioned, the Master of the High Court will be there. Officials from the Master of the High Court will be there. So they deal with wills and estates, inheritance, things like that, divorce, labor-related matters, domestic violence, and really any other issue, legal-related issue.
Mm-hmm. And also talk to us about some of the success stories that you've had since the inception of this initiative.
So some of the success stories that we've had in the past is that, seeing as we have lawyers from the Law Society of Namibia, a lot of them have their own law firms. They belong to law firms. They work for law firms. So they have then taken up some cases pro bono, and they've taken them further. I remember particularly the last one that we had in Windhoek, it was a couple of divorce cases that were actually taken up pro bono. So that I can highlight as some of the successes. Whereas, and even also just, when we've helped people, because information is really power. Sometimes people just really didn't know that this is what they needed to know to move forward or to have their problem solved.
Right.
So I think I can highlight that as some of the successes of the event.
Well, let me thank you so much for your time. Was there something else that you wanted to add about this day?
Yeah, maybe just
the venue,
yeah,
and how the proceedings are going to take place. Must people register before they come, or?
All right, thank you so much. Yes, very crucial information just to invite everybody in Walvis by tomorrow. The Law Society of Namibia, along with the Office of the Ombudsman and officials from the Master of the High Court, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Gender Equality, are going to be at the Walvis Bay Magistrate Court in tomorrow from 1300 hours to 2000 hours. So it's a free legal advice day. You don't need to fork out any money. You don't need to register. Right. The only thing that we can maybe appeal to members of the public is to bring along documentation. If you have any documentation that supports your case or your matter, to please bring it along.
Well, thank you so much once again, and we wish you all the best in your initiative.
Thank you very much.
That is, of course, Aurelia David, who is the Public Relations Officer at the Office of the Ombudsman ending our discussion. We'll take a quick break and we'll be back with a daily roundup. Don't go away. Welcome back. Tourist roads in Etosha National Park are graded gravel roads, and the conditions of the roads vary widely throughout the year. However, the majority of these roads need to be rehabilitated and maintained continuously. To give us more details on the protected areas of Namibia and the state of tourist roads in the Etosha National Park, I'm joined by the Executive Director in the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism, that's Theophilus Ngitila. A very good evening to you, Mr. Ngitila, and thank you so much for being here on the program this evening.
Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Now, Namibia is considered to be a leader in conserving flora and fauna with an extensive network of protected areas or national parks. Briefly talk to us about the general state of our protected areas in Namibia as we speak.
Thank you so much. Namibia Minister of Environment, Forestry and Tourism is mandated to really maintain our national protected area network. As we speak, we have 20 protected area in the country, and this protected area serves as an engine for our tourism, of which one of the major destinations is Etosha National Park. The park which brought me here really to shed some light with regard to the condition of our road network in Etosha National Park.
So what significant value would you say these protected areas contribute towards the country and towards the country's inhabitants?
Yes, as you well are aware, our tourism is very much linked to our conservation. Basically or essentially as related to our abundance of wildlife, of which we are tasked to manage. The conservation in Namibia is one of our priority as a ministry, and as Namibia, We are trendsetter when it comes to conservation of our biological diversity. Tourism in Namibia largely depends on the proper management of our protected area network. The Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Tourism has been doing a great job in maintaining those protected area network.
Right.
So far, we managed to have major protected area in the country to have management, what we call management plan in place. Those management plan serve as a guiding document in terms of how we manage those entities in our country.
So, Mr. Ngitila, what would you say are some of the notable achievements by the Ministry of Environment in as far as the management of national parks is concerned?
As I have indicated, so far we managed to have majority of our protected area having in place management plans. That is a major success. We have improved our entrance gates. Also, we managed to maintain ablution facility in most of our protected area. We managed to maintain water holes for our wild animals in those areas. We also managed to maintain road networks in those protected areas. Managing protected area is not an easy task. It costs money, it costs human resources, it costs you to have in place heavy equipment that are functional. It will really cost quite significant amount of fund to maintain those protected area network in Namibia. We know protected area is an engine of our economy when it comes to tourism. We, as a ministry, are doing everything we can to ensure that biodiversity is managed properly, our wildlife is watered, water points are functional, and also the network in terms of roads are also in good condition. So far, we also managed to provide basic infrastructure in the park. We are talking of upgrading most of our offices in the park, upgrading our housing accommodation for our staff member so that when they go to work, they are energized, they feel proud because their accommodation is in good state. So far, we upgraded accommodation facilities in Bwabwata National Park, in Etosha National Park. We are now completing the Speergebied. We are also completing facilities which will be handed over next week to the ministry after the completion of the project in Secleton Coast Park. So there has been quite a lot of effort from the ministry in ensuring that basic facility in our protected area are working, are functional, and are also utilized. We are talking, for instance, in Etosha. It's a territory by its own. It covers about 22,900 square kilometers. This is a big area to manage. In addition to that, you have around 60 lodges around Etosha. All of those 60 lodges, they took their clients to Etosha National Park. Imagine how much pressure you have in managing such an entity. So you have to make sure at all time that the roads network are in good condition. So we have picked up, or we have observed, increasing number of tourists coming to Etosha. And that is a challenge by itself. These tourists are coming with their 4x4s. We have to maintain about 1,060 kilometers of road network in Etosha National Park. We are talking of the primary roads, which cover about 460 kilometers. These are the roads that stretch from your main entrance gate, your Anderson Gate, Namtuni, and Carlton Gate, down to the King Mihale. All that road network need to be maintained. We are talking of the secondary roads, your roads that links various water points, your detours where tourists are able to see wild animals in Etosha National Park. And then you are talking of your tertiary road network, which are roads that run through the field, roads that are developed to manage field fires. And this stretch about 260 kilometers, of which we have to maintain. So it's a mammoth task, and it's a task that the ministry is really doing excellent so far. It costs money, and it also needs human power.
Well, I hear you, Mr. Ngitila, as you are saying that the ministry is doing all that it can and it's a costly exercise and all that. But lately, we've had reports in the media and social media platforms pertaining to the alleged poor roads, state of roads in the country's national parks, especially in the ENP. So your ministry's response to that, to those comments?
Yes, we are receiving different comments from different stakeholders. I have to acknowledge those who give us really positive feedback when it comes to road conditions in Etosha National Park. I was in Etosha 3 weeks ago. The road conditions are actually in good shape.
Right.
If you have even your small sedan, you are able to travel in Etosha National Park. When, depending the type of vehicles we have, I tell you, the condition of our road network is very smooth. We received good compliment from a number of tourists. And if you wanted to dispute or contrary view, I invite you to visit Etosha and experience really better road condition in Etosha National Park. We acknowledge that this is a continuous work. When you have about over 1,000 tourists every day with their 4x4s, with a varying degree of the tire pressure, so you expect that your gravel road will not be in the same condition every day. It has to differ from stretch to stretch, of which our graders are on site, grading the road almost from 8 to 5. We are proud of our employees that are performing this duty. Of course, if you have a wrong vehicle visiting Etosha, you will probably experience different. And therefore, we may have those negative views with regard to poor conditions of roads in Etosha. But as we speak, we have also contractors on site that are assisting the ministry in maintaining our roads in good shape. We, as a ministry, also went out of our way to get additional funding to ensure that upgrading of Etosha road network is ongoing. We are also happy to report that we are also envisaging to upgrade the major road network in Etosha to a low volume type of road. This will also assist us to reduce the cost in the long run, and also to allow everybody with any type of vehicles to be having access to our treasure, which is Etosha National Park. So we are on the job, and our mandate is to ensure that our protected area is a place to be enjoyed by Namibians and by our visitors alike. The function that we perform proudly, and we are happy to be associated with the work that we are doing. It's a challenge. We have to maintain our ablution facilities. As I have stated, we have around 60 lodges. And all of these, their clients, they come during the day to visit the Tosha. Imagine they have to use water, they have to use ablution facility, and so on, of which we have to maintain.
Right.
So one of our success is also that recently we managed to introduce what we call conservation fee. With this conservation fee, we reinvest that fund into conservation, especially in maintaining our protected area. This is one step ahead in terms of having additional revenue to assist us in maintaining our national parks.
Well, Mr. Ngitila, let me thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much for having me, and a good evening.
Mr. Theo Ngitila, he is, of course, the Executive Director in the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, speaking there to us about the state of tourist roads in especially the Tosha National Park. We are going now for the Global News Roundup, and then we'll be back with more. Don't go away. Fortune Kangwehi should be a household name to you by now. If not, she will be after tonight. She was the very first Namibian to enter MasterChef South Africa in season 1 and used that platform and exposure to build her brand and to forge a career as a self-taught cook. She now joins us tonight, and she will be telling us all about the rise of Chef Fortune. Chef Fortune,
good evening.
Welcome
Sonia.
to Daily Roundup.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
It's so good to have you. Now, relive your MasterChef experience to us, some of us who haven't.
Wow, Sonia, that was so many years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I think it was one of the most exciting yet terrifying experiences of my entire life. I fought my way through from 10,000 contestants to the top 18. And I actually realized during that competition how competitive I am as a person.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a brilliant experience.
But not winning the competition clearly sparked a fire within you. Unpack the journey that followed after that.
So when I came back from MasterChef, I basically went back to my day job in advertising at the time. But I continued cooking. Cooking has always been my passion and the thing that I actually wanted to do. I continued cooking on the side for a couple of years. I was doing private shaving work, events work, but that competition bug never left me. So in 2019, I entered the Namibian Chefs Association Amateur Chef of the Year competition, which I won. And then I continued cooking, and as of August last year, I actually resigned my job as a marketing manager, and I now fully cook.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, tell us, why did you, tap into this niche market by offering personal cooking lessons to nannies and domestic helpers? Why them?
So I wanted to do something that solves a real problem. But at the same time, I really wanted to do something that adds value. So as a working mom in a corporate environment myself, I know the challenge of coming home from work and still having to figure out dinner and cook food, even if I know how to cook. So I can just imagine if you don't know how to cook. So that's why I came up with that solution. But why the domestic workers is I really wanted to give them a skill that they can use outside of their work and possibly even generate income from. So that's why I chose domestic workers in particular. But having said that, I know that not everyone can afford domestic workers or nannies. So I also offer cooking classes to groups, to working moms, to working dads, to students, to individuals at home. So yeah.
Well, that's great. And you don't only offer lessons on cooking any old meal. The nutritious aspect is always important for you. What are some of your affordable nutrition cooking tips?
So eating nutritious and healthy is really not as tricky as you would think. The biggest trick I can possibly give you, or the tip, is just eating whole foods. So not eating anything that is processed. The moment that food is processed, it becomes unhealthy. So examples could be grains such as couscous or millet or bulgur wheat, your brown rices, brown pastas, and then just having a balanced diet with all the different food groups. And then lastly, just how you cook is important. So less frying, more grilling, more steaming as opposed to boiling vegetables to keep the nutrition in the food.
Wow, that's so nice. Now, women chefs aren't something that you come by every day. Ironic, I mean, given the fact that, or the notion that women belong in the kitchen, they are the ones that cook. Why do you think that is?
In my opinion, Sweni, I think it comes from the general gender equality, the age-old gender equality, and the notion that men are breadwinners and women are nurturers, meant to be at home, having children and taking care of the household. So I think that's the biggest reason, because chef, especially in a restaurant, is a grueling job and the hours are very long and irregular. But women do work in kitchens, but just not in leadership roles. So they're mostly in the background, either as a sous chef or a prep, or the feminine job of a pastry chef to make the pretty desserts.
Well, what next now for Chef Fortune?
I'm so
Future
excited.
plans.
I'm so excited about cooking with Fortune. I think in the very, very near future, the thing I'm most excited about is a cooking television show coming to your screens very soon. And then obviously continuously hosting the cooking classes. The next one is, in fact, on the 13th of May. But to keep in touch and abreast of what I am up to, please do like and follow my social media pages. On Instagram, it's at cooking_with_fortune, and on Facebook, it's Cooking with Fortune.
And just one brief question. Those that want to come and, sample your cuisine, where can they go? Is there a restaurant where you prepare food where people can come?
So at the moment, I don't have a restaurant. It's not really a dream of mine. I'm more passionate about teaching, but I do offer private chefing. If you are hosting people and you would love for me to come and cook for you and your guests, absolutely give me a call and then you can taste my food.
Well, Chef Fortune, let me thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you,
and we wish you all the best. We hope you keep on climbing and cooking up a storm.
Thank you so much.
Well, that is, of course, Chef Fortune ending our discussion, and that also then wraps up today's edition of the Daily Roundup. With me, Soini Nagongo, of course, we'll be back same time, same place tomorrow. From me and the rest of the crew, it's good evening and take care.